Martha and I like to linger in bed for a few minutes each morning after the alarm clock rings. After all these years, we knew what was best for us. Those warm, lazy, extra minutes in bed must be paid for with a desperate struggle to get ready for work. A few years ago, the payback also included a mad dash to get the kids ready for school. Now that our 2 kids are gone, we find ourselves lingering in bed more and more often before the mad morning rush, the one that precedes the drive to work. To make matters worse, I had to leave the house a good 20 minutes earlier than usual. Martha had to work late tonight, so instead of taking my car, we work not far from each other, so we commute to work together. I decided to ride my mountain bike to work. The weather forecast was also predicting a gorgeous spring day. I took the last bite of my toast, washed it down with coffee, and was ready to go. "I'm on my way, honey." I called out toward the bathroom where Martha was still busy. I waited for her to poke her head out the door and speak to me, but I didn't hear a response. "I'll see you tonight. I love you," I added after a few seconds. I was running late. I didn't have time to ponder the lack of response from Martha. I threw my keys in my backpack and walked out. I'm Frank McKay, 53-year-old office manager for the State Department of Public Works. My wife, Martha, 49, works as an administrative assistant in the main office of a manufacturing company. We both look better than average, but Martha is dazzling, if I may say so. She doesn't look her age. Many men look in her direction when we go out. 10 minutes later, I heard a whistle announcing that I had received a text message. A few seconds later, my cell phone rang. It's hard enough to keep track of all the cars while biking, and I didn't talk on the phone while on the road. I answered my phone at work. I got to work on time, but was so busy getting properly dressed for an 8:45 meeting that I left my cell phone in my backpack, forgetting about all the phone calls. Later, I followed a group of coworkers for lunch. Finally, during my afternoon coffee break, I remembered the phone calls. I had 5 messages from Martha, 2 text messages, and 3 voice messages. The first text message was sent at 8:10 and read, "You have the wrong keys. Call me." The second text message was sent at 8:35. "I'm waiting for your call." I then listened to the voicemail. The first message was left at 8:11. "Hi, honey. You took the wrong set of keys when you left. Could you drop them off at my work this morning? I'm going to need them. Call me." Her voice was a little harsh, and I didn't understand why. She doesn't need the keys at work. They use a state-of-the-art security system with a key card. The second voicemail was left around 1015. "What are you doing, Dave? I've been waiting for the keys all morning. Call me. I have better things to do than wait for you." I've known Martha for over 25 years, 23 years as a wife. It was obvious to me that she was royally pissed off. Anger and contempt oozed from every word. Before listening to her last voicemail message, I pulled my keys out of my backpack and placed them on the table. I listened to the last message left at 12:55. "Where are you? I'm still waiting for my keys. I don't know what you were thinking this morning, but they better be on my desk this afternoon." This time, Martha didn't hold back her anger. She was almost shouting. I was stunned. Lately, I had begun to get used to Martha getting angry at me over nothing. As she approached 50, I thought that perhaps she was going through changes in her body that were causing her to act strangely. This was the explanation she gave me when I pointed out her change in behavior. She rebuked me when I asked her to see a doctor for hormone treatment, or whatever it is they do with menopause. Life with Martha had gotten very difficult lately. Our relationship was strained. But it was strange to see such an outburst over a bunch of keys she didn't need. I've been working on myself. I think 2 can play the anger game. I decided not to call her and just wait until 5 o'clock to take the damn keys. Shortly after 5, I made it to Martha's workplace. Surprise! Surprise! I was just in time to see her pull out of the parking lot and head home. Despite the heavy traffic and the abilities of my bike, I still couldn't catch up with her. There was no use in doing so anyway, as we were both heading home. I knew she would soon pull out of the heavy traffic and up a speed I couldn't match. so I decided to take my usual more direct route to try and overtake her home. A few minutes later, I was caught off guard when I saw her car heading to another part of town. It was an easier route for me. I could cut through the park, but definitely not the best route for Martha. She turned onto a street lined with many two-story duplexes and parked at the curb. I had my suspicions, so I slowed down watching her from afar as she climbed the stairs and rang the doorbell, typing on her phone. Even from where I was standing in front of my bike, I heard her text ring out. She read the message, walked back to her car, and drove off. What the hell happened? I asked myself. Martha, who was supposed to be working late, had arrived at an unknown apartment. I grabbed the bunch of keys I was holding to get a closer look. I recognized her car keys and our house keys. However, there was another key that I didn't recognize. I had a feeling it was the key that Martha was sorely missing. I walked over to the duplex, climbed the stairs, inserted the key into the front door lock, and turned it. The click of the lock signaled the end of my marriage to Martha. I didn't open the door. I needed to think. What was I going to do? My growing anger made attempting to enter my wife's lover's apartment, destroying his belongings. Or I could wait for him and beat the crap out of him, or I could just go to the police station and go straight to jail. No. Blind anger wasn't the right answer. But I had to do something. I looked into the apartment. Technically, I was committing trespassing, but if I hurried, I wouldn't get caught. The first thing I saw was neatly folded mail on a small table in the hallway. I grabbed the phone bill. The letter was addressed to Steve Muller. I had no idea who it was, but the phone bill could come in handy. I put it in my backpack. There was enough information for the moment. I didn't want to get caught spying in someone else's apartment, so I got the hell out of there. Instead of heading home, I drove to a nearby hardware store. Within minutes, I had a duplicate key. I expected Martha to be home, but her car wasn't in the driveway. I didn't know what her lover had texted her, but it had to be a message to meet him somewhere else. I decided to play with Martha for a while. I called her, but she didn't answer. I didn't leave a text message, but I sent her a voicemail. I'm running late too, but I'll bring my keys soon. I'll be in your office soon. It took a few seconds to get a response. That won't be necessary. I've made other arrangements. I just left my office, just go home, followed her immediate reply. In her head, she probably added, and leave me alone, dumbass. I had a shitty evening. Martha didn't get home until 10 o'clock. That gave me a good 4 hours to decide what to do. First, I wanted proof of her cheating. With the copy I now had on my keychain, it would be easy to just do what I needed to do. The phone bill was pointing to her lover all by itself. They were constantly on the phone and texting each other, even in the evenings when Martha and I were together. All this time, I thought she was texting our children. Did I really need to know why she had decided to leave me? No. It didn't matter now. Our love had faded in the last 6 months. It can only take so much indifference, recriminations and nagging before a man's love begins to fade. I now realized that my loving wife was distancing herself from our marriage. But I never knew it. Today's discovery was the final blow to a very shitty marriage. We're done. There is no benefit to proving adultery in our state. Irreconcilable differences would be a motive, and the judge would split our assets 50-50. But as a cheating husband, I felt I had a lot to gain back some of my pride. I will not allow Martha to lie while married. The reason would be publicized to our children, parents, and friends. Knowing how Martha has changed over the past few months, I wouldn't be surprised if she tried to make me out to be the bad guy in some way. I did play with many revenge scenarios, but decided not to go down that path. I only had a few years before early retirement, and I didn't want to ruin that. Retirement wouldn't be what I had envisioned all those years ago when I was living with Martha, but it was better than going to jail and losing my job. Now at least I would enjoy my retirement the way I wanted to, not the way Martha wanted me to. I decided to face Martha's irritation when she returned from her date so that would work in my favor. Her anger might lead to a small argument and excuse my icy behavior over the next few days. However, sex with Steve must have calmed her down a bit. Now that I was very attentive, I realized that she had averted my eyes a little. When Martha finally got home, she was surprised to see me still sitting in the living room. She threw the spare car key into the container we keep by the door and grabbed her own bunch of keys that I had put there earlier. Taking one look at the keys, she tossed them into her purse. I expected some sort of grunt, but she didn't utter a single word. She headed straight for the bathroom. "I'm tired," she said to someone in the hallway. "I'm going to take a shower and go straight to bed." "What?" I asked. "No love tonight?" Her only response was to close the bathroom door behind her and lock it. Do you know many married people who locked the bathroom door? I hadn't noticed it before, but it happened a lot when Martha came home from working late. My God, I was so stupid. No wonder she was leaving me. Before going to bed, I watched the evening show. I hoped Martha was sound asleep. I swear she was still awake. Sleep was eluding her as well. The next morning, under the pretense of a meeting, I left early in my car. Instead of work, I went to an electronics store and bought some interesting things. It only took me a couple hours to get Mueller's apartment wired for sound and picture. Being in the apartment for so long, I had time to look around. It was very well furnished. Many of the items looked like antiques. I don't know if he had a maid, but his apartment was spotless, not a speck of dust to be seen anywhere. I wonder if he was a stickler for cleanliness. It was food for thought. I hoped my little spy gear would go unnoticed for a few days, at least long enough to get some racy shots of my wife and her lover. I shouldn't have worried about that. Back at the office after lunch, I received another text from Martha asking me not to wait up for her as she had another late meeting. I made an appointment with the lawyer for the next day. That evening, I drove by Mueller's apartment and saw Martha's car. Despite everything I had been through in the last 24 hours, I could still feel my heart sinking at yet another proof of her betrayal. Tomorrow would be a crucial day. I drove back to the house. I was tempted to just check into the town motel, but it would be ridiculous to go to that expense when it wasn't my fault. Back at the house, I considered sleeping in the guest bedroom, but again, I decided that I wasn't the one who ruined our marriage. Let Martha sleep there. I moved all of her things into the guest bedroom in a mess. I just grabbed entire drawers, piled them on the bed, and then pulled clothes off her side of closet and threw them in there as well. Generally, a very soothing activity. I felt better with each armful I carried to her room. When she got home that evening, she looked worse than she had the night before. She had that just fuck look she might have after a 5-hour fuck fest. Again, she was surprised to see me. She didn't bother to explain her lateness or her appearance as if she could explain the reason. I couldn't believe I could cause such pain. Knowing we had a divorce looming over us, I grabbed her hand and dragged her toward the bedrooms. "What are you doing, Frank? You're hurting me," she whimpered. I forced myself to speak more confidently than I felt. I knew I was minutes away from losing her. I had to act fast. I had to keep my cool. "Shut up, bitch," I said loudly. It was so out of character for me saying things like that as if I'd hit her. Suddenly, the accusing looks I've been getting for the past few months were replaced with fear. But what kind of fear? Fear of violence or fear of exposure? I couldn't know that, and I wasn't going to ask. I opened the guest bedroom so she could see her things stacked there. "Starting tonight, bitch," I said sharply. "This is your room," and I pushed her inside. "We're not husband and wife anymore. Stay away from me," I warned her. "In fact, it would be better if you just packed up and left right now." Martha was annoyed and angry. She resisted trying to leave the room. "Oh, no. You bastard. If any of us are sleeping in the guest room, it's you," she said. "I broke my back, taking care of the kids. You in the house. Show some respect or leave the house." Did I wanna argue with her? No. I forcefully pushed her back into the guest room, surprising us both with the force of my action. "I'm giving you two choices," I growled at her. "Either you sleep here until our divorce is final or you go live with Steve Mueller right now." His name struck her like a karate kick. Despite her behavior in recent months, Martha still knew me better than anyone. She realized I knew about her cheating, and she knew I had no forgiveness. She knew I would never accept her back into my life, and we would never part as friends. Who wants to be friends with someone who stabbed you in the back? I could see in her eyes that she didn't envision getting caught, and she wasn't ready for a confrontation. After a few seconds, I saw a defeat written all over her face. She staggered into the bedroom, threw off her clothes, and sat on the bed. Tears slowly rolled down her cheeks. She said something I couldn't hear. "What?" I shouted. "I'm sorry," she said a little louder. "I was so stupid. Please don't hate me." "You know me, Martha," I said. "I won't hate you after a while, but I'm sure I won't love you either. Hell, I don't know if I can just be around you." I started to close the door, but I wanted to hurt her some more. "I'd rather make this quick," I said firmly. "I'd appreciate it if you left as soon as possible. Just sign the divorce papers you'll be getting soon, and we'll never have to see each other again." I closed the door, speaking to Martha one last time before the court hearing. The last sound I heard was her sobbing. The next day, I picked up my spy gear from Mueller's apartment. My next stop was my attorney. Since my demands were simple, he showed me that the divorce papers could be delivered within 2 days. I paid him in advance and left. I tried to go back to work, but it was more than futile. I finally explained my predicament to my supervisor, who told me to take a few days off. I drove home, but when I arrived, I saw Martha in the process of moving and parked further down the street. From the video I watched, I recognized Steve Mueller helping her. I had the urge to beat him up, but the extra 3 inches 40 pounds he had against me made that more desirable than possible. I left. Later that night, I felt the real impact of Martha's betrayal for the first time. My anger vanished, replaced by a loneliness like I had never experienced. The divorce would have been more traumatic if our children still lived with us. What was a blessing was also a curse, as I had no one to turn to for comfort. My parents were deceased. My brother and sister lived on the other side of the country. I decided to reach out to my 2 daughters. I was surprised to learn that Martha had not yet contacted them. She called and texted them all the time in college. A few weeks ago, if someone had asked me the proper behavior toward a cheating spouse, I would have advocated discretion, keeping the peace, and respecting 23 years of devotion as a mother and wife. Now suffering, desperate for love, or at least sympathy, I told my 2 daughters, Mandy and Tess, all about it. I felt good knowing that neither of them doubted me when I told them that their mother had cheated on me, left me for another man. For a moment, I thought they might have known about their mother, but they were very upset by the news, and I dismissed the thought. My barely restrained sobs also helped to convince them. Their understanding was a great comfort to me. I made a big mistake that day. By the time I finished calling the kids, I had already had 1 full bottle of wine. I'm not a big drinker. Martha and I might have 1 or 2 bottles of wine a week, or sometimes 6 beers. The mistake wasn't the drinking. It was alcohol-induced self-pity. Faced with failure, a man must take responsibility for that failure, but try as I might, I couldn't understand what I had done to push Martha away. My job had never been an obstacle to my family life. I didn't have to travel maybe once every 5 years for retraining. My overtime was limited to a few fixed periods a year. To be honest, I've probably let myself go a bit in the last few years since I turned 50, but I was by no means fat or out of shape. Mueller didn't seem much younger or in better shape than I was. I wondered if he was a better lover, an area in which my knowledge was rather meager. I hadn't had much experience before I met Martha, just 4 girlfriends between the ages of 18 and 28, and Martha and I had a lot to learn together after we met. I don't think Martha left me for social status either. His apartment didn't seem outlandish, his pieces of furniture showed more than anything else. But he wasn't a father. We were probably in the same income bracket. As I curled up in the fetal position for the night, it occurred to me that there was no good reason why she left, only that I was who I was. Can you struggle with being yourself? Can I stop existing so that everything can be okay? My call the next morning came around 10 o'clock. I picked up the phone without looking at the caller ID. "You son of a bitch," Martha yelled. "You shouldn't have been so rude, demanding, and tests." For a second, I wanted to just hang up, but part of me wanted the confrontation to put this whole nightmare behind me. "What's rude, sweetie?" I asked. "The way you cheat on me for months, or the way you move in with your lover, or is it all of the above?" There was only silence. "I hate silence." "Martha, some part of me still loves you," I said. "I won't say whether it is my female part or my male part, perhaps my stupid part, but there's one thing I'll never do, lie to our family." "You wouldn't dare," she pleaded. "Not Daddy. Please, watch me," I said and hung up. My finger hovered over the speed dial button for Martha's father, but I didn't press it. Harvey had been miserable since his wife died of breast cancer 2 years ago. He was a very good man, but in his 80s, his health was a bit fragile. I think his will to live was a little weak. I could certainly understand that today, and he was a good man. I might as well have let him die peacefully instead of ruining his life because of his daughter's behavior. My anger was receding. I decided to inform Martha of my decision. I picked up Mueller's cell phone bill and dialed the number listed on it. A male voice answered. I hesitated for a second. "Martha McKay, please?" I asked. There was silence for a moment. I could hear someone crying in the background. "Obviously, Martha." "Who's asking?" Mueller asked. "Her father, you fucking piece of shit." I lied, unable to hold back a wave of indignation. "Oh, and forget about talking to her. Just tell my daughter not to call me. Forget I exist and leave my grandchildren, my son-in-law, and me alone. Bye, asshole." Less than a minute later, feeling a little remorseful, I dialed Martha's cell phone number. She answered almost immediately, but didn't say anything. She was still hiccuping with tears. "Hello, Martha." I broke the silence. "Did you have a good day?" "Frank, why?" she asked. "Why did you tell my father?" "It would destroy him. He's been in such poor health lately." "You knew that?" "Hey, don't shift the blame, bitch," I said, as such an insult was hard to utter. "It wasn't your father who was on the phone with your lover. It was me. I love your father, and I know you would have killed him with your cheating." I want to emphasize something here. "Are you listening to me?" "Yes," she said. "I'm listening. Don't ever let this guy come between me and my girls, or your father will know everything about you. All the raw details, as you rightly put it," I told her. "Don't think I'm kidding. I've trusted you for most of my adult life. I didn't know it was possible, but you broke that trust." I'm repeating myself, but I have to fight myself not to just shoot you on sight. I have a lot of hate in my heart for you, and that's what defines me at this moment. Do you get it? "Yes," she finally said between sobs. "Mark," she sobbed. "I'm so sorry. I never wanted this." "Neither did I," I said and hung up. 6 months later, I received the official papers that defined the official end of my marriage. I had recovered from my bout of depression, but there was still something missing in my life. I couldn't figure out what it was. I dated a few women, but I didn't get very far. I guess they recognized that I had a lot of baggage. I had a one-night stand with a work acquaintance divorced like me. Sex seemed empty without love and affection. We were just two adults desperate for relief, but it left me with a sense of loneliness worse than before. Coming home from work one evening, an epiphany finally came over me. After moving into my new apartment, we'd sold the house to split the proceeds. I said hello to a new friend who had shown up 2 weeks ago. "Hi, Jack," I said, peeking out the door. I was going back to the days when I was a bachelor, giving names to the dusty clumps gathering everywhere in my house, mostly behind doors and under the bed. Jack stood by the front door, while Roger and Bugs lived under the bed. I was almost ready to pick up the vacuum cleaner in the closet, embarrassed by the thought that Mueller would never leave his apartment in such a state. As I curled up in the fetal position for the night, It occurred to me that there was no good reason why she left, only that I was who I was. Can you struggle with being yourself? Can I stop existing so that everything can be okay? My call the next morning came around 10 o'clock. I picked up the phone without looking at the caller ID. "You son of a bitch!" Martha yelled. "You shouldn't have been so rude, demanding, and tests." For a second, I wanted to just hang up, but part of me wanted the confrontation to put this whole nightmare behind me. "What's rude, sweetie?" I asked. "The way you cheat on me for months, or the way you move in with your lover, or is it all of the above?" There was only silence. "I hate silence." "Martha, some part of me still loves you," I said. "I won't say whether it is my female part or my male part, perhaps my stupid part, but there's one thing I'll never do, lie to our family." "You wouldn't dare," she pleaded. "Not Daddy. Please, watch me," I said and hung up. My finger hovered over the speed dial button for Martha's father, but I didn't press it. Harvey had been miserable since his wife died of breast cancer 2 years ago. He was a very good man, but in his 80s, his health was a bit fragile. I think his will to live was a little weak. I could certainly understand that today. And he was a good man. I might as well have let him die peacefully instead of ruining his life because of his daughter's behavior. My anger was receding. I decided to inform Martha of my decision. I picked up Mueller's cell phone bill and dialed the number listed on it. A male voice answered. I hesitated for a second. "Martha McKay, please," I asked. There was silence for a moment. I could hear someone crying in the background. "Obviously, Martha." "Who's asking?" Mueller asked. "Her father, you fucking piece of shit." I lied, unable to hold back a wave of indignation. "Oh, and forget about talking to her. Just tell my daughter not to call me. Forget I exist and leave my grandchildren, my son-in-law, and me alone." By asshole. Less than a minute later, feeling a little remorseful, I dialed Martha's cell phone number. She answered almost immediately, but didn't say anything. She was still hiccuping with tears. "Hello, Martha." I broke the silence. "Did you have a good day?" "Frank, why?" she asked. "Why did you tell my father?" "It would destroy him. He's been in such poor health lately." "You knew that." "Hey. Don't shift the blame, bitch," I said, as such an insult was hard to utter. "It wasn't your father who was on the phone with your lover. It was me. I love your father, and I know you would have killed him with your cheating." I want to emphasize something here. "Are you listening to me?" "Yes," she said. "I'm listening. Don't ever let this guy come between me and my girls, or your father will know everything about you. All the raw details, as you rightly put it," I told her. "Don't think I'm kidding. I've trusted you for most of my adult life. I didn't know it was possible, but you broke that trust." I'm repeating myself. But I have to fight myself not to just shoot you on sight. I have a lot of hate in my heart for you, and that's what defines me at this moment. Do you get it? "Yes," she finally said between sobs. "Mark," she sobbed. "I'm so sorry. I never wanted this." "Neither did I," I said, and hung up. 6 months later, I received the official papers that defined the official end of my marriage. I had recovered from my bout of depression, but there was still something missing in my life. I couldn't figure out what it was. I dated a few women, but I didn't get very far. I guess they recognized that I had a lot of baggage. I had a one-night stand with a work acquaintance divorced like me. Sex seemed empty without love and affection. We were just two adults desperate for relief, but it left me with a sense of loneliness worse than before. Coming home from work one evening, an epiphany finally came over me. After moving into my new apartment, we'd sold the house to split the proceeds. I said hello to a new friend who had shown up 2 weeks ago. "Hi, Jack," I said, peeking out the door. I was going back to the days when I was a bachelor, giving names to the dusty clumps gathering everywhere in my house, mostly behind doors and under the bed. Jack stood by the front door, while Roger and Bugs lived under the bed. I was almost ready to pick up the vacuum cleaner in the closet, embarrassed by the thought that Muller would never leave his apartment in such a state. The next day, I ripped the corner of the condom wrapper off and left it on the floor by the bed. I pulled the blanket up, jumped around a little in the middle of the bed to disturb the sheets, and put the blanket back down almost exactly as it was. I also left the imprints of 2 glasses on the coffee table, some ashes in the toilet, and a working ceiling fan. I picked up another porcelain trinket, broke it, and threw it in the trash. I grabbed a rare bottle of wine off the shelf, picked the one with more dust on it, opened it, poured it down the drain and left the empty one in the trash. That was my grand finale. That evening, my phone rang. It was my youngest test. Daddy, you have to do something. She yelled. Anything for you, honey, I said. Help mommy. She said, barely holding back her sobs. She's at the police station. This guy hit her and she called the police. She has nowhere to go. She doesn't want to go back there anymore. He's gotten pretty violent lately, and she said, hang in there, honey. I interrupted her. I'm not the man to help your mother. I hate her to the core, and I have to admit that I really like what's happening to her, not the beating, but the complete fiasco with her boy toy. What's going on around? Daddy pleaded. Tests. She's my mom, and she needs help. Okay. It's only because you're asking, I said. Don't expect me to do anything more than just pick her up and drive her. Thanks, Dad. A few minutes later, I was at the police station. She was still being questioned, so I had to wait a little while, but I sent her a note saying I was waiting for her. I have to admit. An hour later, I felt terrible when I saw Martha with a black eye on her left eye. She cried when she saw me walking toward me with open arms. I fought myself, but managed to reach out my arms to keep her at arm's length. Hey. I'm here because my daughter asked me to come. I said, don't ever think we're going to be friends. I'll give you a ride wherever you want to go. That's all. I walked out of the police station without looking back to see if she was following me. Her subs were the only sign that she was near. Once in the car, I asked, where do you want to go? Home. She replied. Without saying a word, I drove to my destination. Martha reacted only when I turned onto Muller Street and parked in front of the house. I don't want to go there, she said, holding back tears. Look, Mueller's in jail right now. That leaves you plenty of time to gather your things and leave. She stared at me for a few seconds, then got out of the car and headed for the apartment. Soon she started taking out trash bags with her clothes in them. She didn't take much when she left me, so she finished quickly. Once she was done, we left. After a few minutes, she asked where we were going. I could hear the fear in her voice. We're going to your father's house. I told her. You said you wanted to go home. You don't have another home. We drove in silence for a few more minutes. Her father lives far away in the suburbs. I didn't get a chance to apologize to you, Martha said, breaking the silence. I'm sorry for what I did. I was stupid, and you caught me cheating. I accept that, but I never stopped loving you. I just forgot what that meant for a while. I didn't even want to live with Steve. We didn't have much in common. I want to tell you that I'm sorry for hurting you. I didn't answer. There was nothing to say. Could I have said it's okay? Absolutely not. Could I tell her I forgive her? That would be a lie, since I still resented the way she had ruined our marriage. I was silent. I think my silence hurt her more than any pompous speech I could have made to let her know how much she had hurt me. I still couldn't understand how you could swear your love to a man and then hurt him so seriously. Near her father's house, Martha looked at me. What am I going to tell my father? She asked. It rendered me speechless. What the fuck? We'd been divorced for months, and she hadn't told her father. You've got to be kidding me, I said. Harvey doesn't know we're divorced. Well, I just told him we were in trouble. Martha said, you're definitely in trouble now. I replied, find a good reason, but don't make me the bad guy, or I'll hear about it and tell him the truth. It was late, but I didn't offer to help Martha move her things into her father's house. First of all, I was enjoying her misery a little. Second, I didn't want to talk to Harvey. The next day, I parked across the street from Mueller's house. He got home just before noon. It was time to put the final nail in the coffin of their flotation. I grabbed the cheapest bottle of Chilean wine I bought along the way, a $10 investment, and headed up the stairs. Miller opened the door and was surprised to recognize me. "Hi," I said. "We've never met, but I'm Frank McKay, Martha Sharp's ex-husband." I offered him a bottle of wine, and he took it. "Here, take it, so you know I'm not a freeloader. This will replace the other bottle of wine I emptied," I said. Then I stuck my hand in my pocket and pulled out a key. The key to his apartment. I gave it to him. "Oh, and I won't be needing this either. Martha moved out last night." I smiled all the way to my car. I was in high spirits knowing that Mueller would be more sorry for the loss of his $900 bottle of Chateau Montelena than for the loss of Martha. I had a springy step. Revenge can be so sweet. I guess I can move on now after burning that bitch.